everyone. Welcome to the Boulder Bookstore's YouTube channel. My name is Stephanie. I set up all the events here at the store. And today I'm going to talk about books around the world. Because I already did one of my previous videos was about, books set in New York, so I thought this time I'd traverse farther than that into places that I've never been, but all sound amazing. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Mountains Sing by Nguyen Phan K Mai. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that last name right, but this book, I feel like this is a book that every American should read. So the author is Vietnamese, and I believe this is her first book that she's written. She wrote this in English, but she's apparently a very well-known poet in Vietnam. And this is not quite, it's a novel, but I think it's based on a lot of her family stories and the stories of people that she's talked with. So it's the story of this family in Vietnam kind of starting in the 1930s and going through like the early 2000s. So it covers French occupation of Vietnam, it covers Japanese invasion of Vietnam during World War II, and it covers the Vietnam War, but told from a perspective that I certainly had never encountered before, which is that of the actual Vietnamese people. And it's lush and beautiful, and like there's such love for the land and for the Vietnamese people in this book, and such compassion. But it talks about some really hard things. Like the book opens with bombing in Hanoi in 1970s, and the main character is a little girl. She's like 10 or 11, and both like half of her family has gone off to this war in various degrees. Her mother is a nurse, and her father and her uncles have gone off to fight, and so she's there with her grandmother, and there's bombing, and and they're like running through the streets trying to find shelter, and and it's mostly a lot of children and older people, and it was so intense when I was reading it that I nearly missed my bus stop when I was coming to work because I was just so gripped. But it's just really beautifully told, and just a really important story just to see it's not really the war is sort of the backdrop, but it's never really about the war. It's about how just the regular citizens are surviving. And you hear some of the stories from people who were on different sides of everything in Vietnam and from World War II. And I mean, there's a lot of horrible things that happened to this poor family, the Tran family, but it's just so beautifully told, and I just think it's really something that every American should read, because this is just a really important story from a perspective that I certainly haven't seen anywhere else. So, The Mountains Sing. Alright, next up, The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwege Emezi. And this book is set in Nigeria, and it's another gorgeously told, it's one of those words we always keep saying, gorgeous. We like books that are gorgeously written, what can I say? But The Death of Vivek Oji focuses on Vivek Oji, and as you can tell from the title, Vivek Oji dies. And you come to learn more. It's really about the story of who Vivek Oji is. To Vivek's parents, he is a son, but to themselves, they are not quite that. So it's a lot about their relationship with their cousin of Sita, and this deep bond they have that goes into romance. So I will put a disclaimer there. I think a lot of American, we have a sensibility that isn't quite, that makes that feels very strange and weird to us, but it's just so beautifully told. The love between them is really tender, and the way that Osita struggles with it, and the way that Vivek just wants to be, and the trials and tribulations that they go through. And you hear from different perspectives. Vivek's mother is Indian, father is Nigerian. They live in Nigeria, and so they have a lot of interactions with mixed kids in this town, and they have a really tight-knit group, and it's really fun to see the friendships they have. But you know from the beginning, obviously, that Vivek dies, and I think it even opens with the finding of the body, but it's It's just really lovely, and it's heartbreaking and sad, but also hopeful. I think that's another thing that's throughout all three of the books that I'm talking about, is that there's a lot of hardship and heartbreak, but there's also a lot of hope. And I pretty much love everything that Oji writes, so check this one out. Alright, my last book, Gravelheart by Abdulrazak Gurnah, who was the 2021 Nobel Prize winner, and this book is set mostly in Zanzibar, partly in London as well, but Zanzibar, so that's, another country I don't think a whole lot of Americans know a whole lot about. I certainly didn't know anything about Zanzibar before reading this book. And it's set, it kind of goes over a revolution that happened in Zanzibar that, again, I had known nothing about, but in how colonialism and the results of this revolution in Zanzibar basically affected everyone in big and small ways. So the main character, Salim, it starts with him being a child, and just knowing that, like at some point when he was like 4 or 5, when he was fairly young, his father just stopped speaking to him and left the house. And he spent many, many years not understanding why. And it wasn't like he disappeared. He moved 2 blocks away and was living in the back of a little shop, and his mother Salim's mother would bring his father food every day. So it was just very weird circumstances that you have to get, you can kind of, about halfway through, you're kind of guessing what really happened, but it's a lot of Salim just trying to find his way in the world, and he's born and growing up after this revolution has happened, so he doesn't quite know. It takes him a while to learn the stories of his family and learn how that has affected him, but essentially it's also an immigrant story because about maybe a quarter of the way through, his uncle, who's done very well for himself and has been living in London and is like an ambassador, and he's got lots of money, and so he's told his sister that he wants Salim to come and go to school and go to college in London, because that's the only future that could possibly be for him. So a lot of the middle part of the story is all him being in London and trying to deal with his uncle's expectations and trying to deal with being, in a foreign land where he knows the language. He's grown up speaking English, but he, is still everything is very full of the culture and the clothes and the cold and all of these different things. And it's, a lot of that immigrant experience and him, encountering other immigrants and learning their stories. But it's also, it's a very subtle and quiet book, so there's not huge, big, loud things that happen, but it's more like the reverberations of these big, loud things that did happen and how those things have rippled down and affected his life, even though no one in his family really had anything to do with the revolution or any of that. He's just kind of on the outskirts, and that's how people and it's like about how he's being affected by that also. Those are my 3 books around the world. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy what we're doing here, we'd really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe. Thanks so much.